how does that work when a selling agent is not offering commission for the buyer's agent?
Okay. So that's a question. How does that work if they're not offering it? So number one, in the future, very soon, we're not going to know who's offering anything.
Will it be
Like
the listing?
it will
Will it,
not be, it will not be in the multiple listing service.
hmm?
So my plan is so I use what's called Linktree. Have you guys heard of Linktree? So, and I'll just share my screen just to show you. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. So I bought myname.com and it goes to my Linktree account. So anything that I want to be able to direct people to go visit, whether it's a webinar or an ebook or a report, or my reviews or my vendors, my search, this, that, the other thing, I can link them all here. So my thought was at the top here or somewhere I was going to put in, my commissions on my listings and then just link it to a Google spreadsheet. So that way, any agent, like we can't say in the multiple listing service, to look at anybody's website. But at least I'll have a central resource so that I can at least advertise it. And then elsewhere, like in social media, I can reference it. So the new rule is that you will need to have a buyer agency agreement signed before you show properties. Have any of you worked with buyers before? I know Patricia's been in the business for a little while, right? But the others?
Not yet.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, the first thing you need to do is learn how to do a buyer consult, and the first step in that is finding out information about what the buyer's goals are. A lot of times people overly focus on the house that somebody wants to buy rather than focusing on what money do you have in the bank for the purchase? What monthly payment can you afford? Where generally do you want to be? Minimum beds, baths, some basic criteria. And then when do you want to do this? Do you have a lease? Do you want to time it with your lease end date? Knowing that you could potentially buy up to 2 months without, like 2 or 3 months without doubling up on your payments if you time it right. So helping understand their timing and possibly based on how mortgages work, where let's say you settle on September 1st, my first payment is due November 1st. So if somebody, has a lease through the end of November and they've prepaid their last month's rent, they could technically own this property for 90 days overlapping without doubling up on payments. So by understanding how mortgages work and understanding the buyer's, timeframes, we can help them move their search earlier and help them be ready earlier than they might be otherwise thinking that they are. And then connecting them with a lender right away so you know exactly what they can afford. Because what they can afford to me is more important than what it is they want to buy. Because then what they can afford, we match it up with what is out there and we determine whether or not it's reality, what they can afford and what they want if they match up. I'm just going to, because I'm thinking about this, and I'm just going to go with this train of thought is that, you may hear buyers wanting to wait because of interest rates. And I think that would be a big mistake because, the question is, well, what do you think happens if rates go down? Do you, oh, well, more buyers are going to be jumping into the market. So more competition for you. Or prices could go up because interest rates are going down. So there's a lot of variations or variables that you can't control. What you can control is your life. Your life may have conditions on it. So for example, if you're a parent and you want to finish out the school year, I had a client that was like, we listed, I think it was in March. They didn't want to settle until July. We settled July 8th. So they wanted to be in the home through, the end of June. So that was a condition. So we listed it, got multiple offers right away, and had a really long closing because there was competition. We got exactly what we wanted. For a buyer, if your lease ends in a certain time frame and you want to quote unquote wait a year because rates are higher right now, well, guess what? That $2,000 a month rent is $24,000 you will never ever get back. At the very least, if you secure a home when rates are higher and there's potentially less competition for these homes, and the price is probably lower than it will be in the future, you can always refinance if rates go down. And guess what? If rates don't go down, at least you have the house, So if a buyer is not facing certain conditions where they don't have enough money, they can't make the purchase. If they're thinking about these more external factors, those are probably not as wise to follow as those internal factors and those personal decisions. Like, where am I going to live? Where do I want to send my kids to school? What kind of lifestyle do I want to lead? I am way more interested in those internal factors, than those external factors. So, and just to give you kind of like a real snapshot, I always like to think about it this way, is that if you were to be a renter for 30 years versus a homeowner for 30 years, starting at a $1,000 a month payment in both cases, guess what your net worth difference will be after 30 years? Even at these rates.
$1.4 million.
Tereska, you are very close. You are very close.
All I did was multiply 1,000 by 12. 12 times 12 is 14. I left out the 400.
Okay.
And then try to multiply it by 30.
Okay.
I did it by 10.
Okay, yeah. So it's a little lower than that, but it is about $1.1 million.
I did it.
Yeah, because if you think about it this way, if you start out at $1,000 a month in rent and your rent goes up by 3% every year, and that is very conservative, like that anticipates you never moving, and if you move even every 5 years, I just moved literally 2 days ago, I spent $2,400. Like, so let's say you multiply that by 5 times over 30 years, that's a whole nother chunk of change. And chances are when you move, your payment goes up. So 3% is a very modest estimate. So your rent at $1,000 today over 30 years is $570,000 in the hole. All right. Now, if you are if you're a homeowner and and actually, actually the difference is actually like 1.2 million. But anyway, so if your monthly, if your house appreciates, so the $1,000, I know why I did that. Okay. So basically the $1,000 gets you a home of around $200,000. That home after 30 years at 4% annual appreciation, which is the historical norm, is about $600,000. So between the two, or like 550. I've done the I did the math when it was like lower rates, but at the higher rates, it's $1.1 million. But effectively, you spend $570,000 in rent over the next 30 years versus buy a house, about $200,000. It's going to triple in value essentially over those 30 years. So you're ahead by over 600,000 versus being behind by 570. So it's ultimately it's a 1.1 to $1.2 million difference, being a homeowner. And when you look in the very near term, of what somebody pays in rent every year versus the equity that they're forgoing building up equity. They're not paying down their mortgage if they're renting. They're not earning that appreciation if they're renting and not earning, so it could still be $30,000 difference after 1 year. It could be not, $90,000 after 1 year. It just depends on that buyer's starting point. So number one, we want to make sure that we understand the buyers, their timing, their economic situation, the basics of where they want to live, and, you know, and then making sure what they can afford is lines up with reality, and then connecting them with a lender. In our consultation. So this is all information that I ask for people, or ask up front before I even meet with people. You know, why do you want to live? Why do you want to own? I'm looking for internal factors. You know, why do you want to own? What's your timing? What can you afford? What are your assets? And then basic information about where you want to live. Then in our consultation, I'm reviewing all of these things with them, and I'm teaching them about the process along the way. I'm teaching them, I do a buyer closing estimate from the data they gave me. I'm doing a preliminary multiple listing service search for them. And I'm sharing with them in our consult, hey, based on what you're looking for, this is what it's going to cost you out of pocket. This is the monthly. And if there's something that's not jiving, I will ask them, hey, you know, you wanted to spend 50K out of pocket and you wanted your monthly payment to be 2,500. For the home that you want, it looks like the monthly payment is 3,000. Is that doable, or should we adjust the price downward? So I'm not, and so then I will show them what they can afford based on their monthly payment maximum. You know, so I'll never take it at face value what they tell me on the sheet, because they might not know how those numbers line up. Like, and I don't even care. I don't know if you notice this. I don't even care what price they think they can afford. I want to know the assets they have to spend, and the monthly payment that they can afford. And then I can tell them based on where they want to be, based on those taxes and what I think the insurance might be, and whether they're paying mortgage insurance. I can then tell them, you know, what that price point is going to be. So oftentimes they're off, you know. So yeah, so then in that consultation, we're also going over the process of what it looks like to buy. We're talking about the mortgage process, the inspection process, the title process. We're talking about deposits, and I'm educating them along the way. So, you know, and I'm asking them in that intake form that, you know, you can like easily find variations on that. I'm asking them, you know, what, I forget how I phrase it, but like, how can I make this a great experience for you, such that I earn a 5-star review and all of the referrals of your family and friends? And because I've asked that question up front, I know how to tailor my consultation with them. Because if they tell me they want education, they want hand-holding, they don't want to be pressured, they want help finding the right house, everything I'm going to do and say is all to show them that. So that way, by the time we get to the end of the conversation where we're deciding whether or not they want to work with me, it's a clear yes. And they understand that they're getting a lot of value by signing that buyer agency agreement. So before we go into the specifics of that conversation about commission and buyer agency, what questions or thoughts do you have based on what I just shared?
Let's continue with your conversation. You found the buyer a house after you did your consult. Now keep talking up until commission. This house
Well,
has commission, or you don't know the commission. How would you explain to me, how would you seek your commission for the buyer after you did the consult?
So you talk about commission in the consult. You secure that you're getting paid with that buyer in the consult. You don't show houses until you've secured your ability to get paid.
So I'm your buyer. Show me how.
Well, I just paused here to see if anybody had any questions about what I just spoke about before we get into that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. No, you did terrific. I understood everything you said.
Okay. Yes.
So do you send them to a lender before you have them sign the buyer agreement?
So in my consultation, I go over everything that I just did. And then at the end, I ask them, well, I state to that, I read them what they wrote as far as what I can do to help them, or how I could make this a great experience. And then I say, would you like to add anything to that? Or maybe, they say, what good communication. I ask them, what is good communication to you? Don't forget to ask clarifying questions. And then, usually at this point, it's clear we're going to be working together. So it's like, but I ask, do you, you know, what do I even ask? It's like, I feel like I don't even need to ask anymore because it's like, it's just clear we're going to be working together. But like, so do you think we can accomplish this together? You know, and the answer is invariably yes. So now in my consultations, I will be adding the conversation about like, so what, you know, what is your understanding of how I get paid? You know, so that way you learn what they know already about what's going on in the market and how things work. So interestingly enough, I've only had one full-on buyer consultation. Like I mostly do work with sellers, and I've only had one full-on buyer consultation since the rules have changed. In that, and I explained to him, and this was a guy who was looking at anywhere from like 250 to 300, and I was able to convince him to pay me $10,000 minimum, and like that was going to be what it was. So that was over 3%, because I decided like I'm not getting in my car for under 10K. Like I'm just not. And the value that I bring to the transaction, especially when you're talking about long-term wealth and looking at the homes and identifying things that could be problems right up front. Now, if you're new, you may not be able to justify that, you know, but I've been doing this for 20 years now, and I feel confident about it. And I know like what will get me in the car and what won't get me in the car, you know? And something about, you know, when you're shopping at a certain level, charging a flat fee to like a whole swath of buyers also takes out the appearance of you caring what price they pay. Because no matter what, if you're earning a flat fee, like I'll be just as happy to help you buy a $200,000 house as a $300,000 house. Or if let's say we're negotiating a house that they're asking 280, whether you pay 260 or 280, like I've always felt like the cheaper I could get this house for you, the better the deal. I have like that earns me cred. That's going to earn me way more business than earning a few more $100. That's not necessarily the perception out there, you know, like, I don't know if you ever read the book Freakonomics, where he talks about how we're, you know, because we're percentage based, we're incentivized to get the buyer to pay more. I'm like, well, yeah, I guess there are money hungry agents out there. That's just not me. And I'm not incentivized that way. So I can only really speak to myself. And most agents I talk to are like, I don't care about money. I just want to help people. So I feel like there's a degree to which most people I talk to really I want the bragging rights that I got you a better deal than a few $100 extra. That's just me. But anyway, so yeah, so the conversation is like, so also based on getting the information up front, what you can do is you look at their price point you believe that they'll be in, and maybe give yourself a $25,000 range in either direction. Look at the properties that they would be looking at in the multiple listing service. Oh, actually, goodness gracious, we won't be able to do that anymore. Anyway, okay, so you can like, well, first of all, yeah, you have to establish your minimum baseline, whether it's a percentage or a dollar amount. But based on, you know, and this kind of like blew my mind when I really thought about it, because I was working with a buyer that they were trying to buy a house for like 200, as close to 200 as possible or less. And it was just such a disaster. And I was like, guys, you need to spend more money. If you don't want to buy a money pit, you need to spend more money up front. It's going to be a lot cheaper for you to buy it up front, pay more for the house than to buy a cheap house that needs a ton of work. And we went under contract with one property. I had somebody helping me. They should have never let them go under contract. They wouldn't have appraised. So that's why I'm very hesitant to partner with people without that experience, and why I suggest go on as many inspections as you can, because you can build up very quickly your knowledge of homes if you go on, you know, shadow some inspections. Take a week, go on one every day, or take 2 days and shadow 6 inspections, whatever it is. Just get a ton of information up front about the actual home, because then you will very quickly be able to justify a higher commission. And that's probably going to be my new advice, like seriously, for agents in this era, because you need to have value. And like, by building up that like knowledge quickly, that's going to help you. But anyway, so yeah, so with this couple, I looked, I was like, at the end of the day, I got them under contract twice, got them to closing, very challenging deal left and right, and got paid $6,500. And I was like, I worked so hard for $6,500. And like, I was just like, this is where the 10,000 minimum came from. I was like, you know, and then looking at, you know, the next buyer where I realized like, I just didn't want to get in the car for less than 10. If he had bought a house at a certain level, I would have got 6,200, and at the high level, maybe 9,000. I was like, what in
I don't hear
May
you. Oh,
versus 9,000, you know, that's 50% more or 33% less, depending on how you look at it. I was like, that is ridiculous. You know, like that is ridiculous. So anyway, so I was able to, you can just then anticipate whatever your minimum commission is going to be based on their you know, assets, factor in what it would look like if they needed an additional seller assist, or for the seller to cover it, or for them to come out of pocket, and run a couple of closing cost scenarios. And I was able to show him like, hey, we might be able to build it into this. Well, first of all, get together with lenders who have grants, because this is the buyer who doesn't have the money to pay you is the one that will qualify most likely for grants. And what's interesting about the buyer who did agree to pay $10,000 in commission, he ended up paying about $2,500 additional commission, but it didn't come out of pocket, because I connected him with a lender that got him grants. And my closing estimate, he was he was going to get like, I'm trying to remember how he was going to have to come to come to the table with money, and he ended up getting money back at closing. So like, if that's not a testimonial to why like we're worth it, I don't know what is. So anyway, so because he wasn't going to stumble on a grant, you know, like okay, so you asked them, you know, what is your understanding of you know, how I get paid? And then, you know, they'll tell you whatever they understand and be like, well, you know, the easiest thing is if they don't need a seller assist, you know, so you'd have to explain to them, it used to be that the commission was advertised in the multiple listing service, and you know, it will no longer be advertised. And, you know, I've run a couple of scenarios of what it would look like to hire me as your advocate, and what it would look like, you know, money out of pocket and money per month. And you know, you have a couple of those scenarios, and, you know, the whole consultation, or I like to call them buyer strategy sessions, you've been showing your value, where you're going to add value. You know, it's with saving them time and consolidating all of the tours. So rather than going on 10 individual appointments that might take 45 minutes each, you're going to consolidate that into, instead of 10 hours, or what's 9 hours, 45 minutes, whatever. Actually, let me just do the math. 450 minutes divided by 60. Yeah, 7.5 hours. Rather than doing, you know, 10 different tours in 7.5 hours with 10 different listing agents, I'm going to save you time we're going to see those, you know, same 10 houses in 3 or 4 hours, or whatever it is. So every time we go out, I'm going to save you time. I'm going to be your sounding board. I'm not interested in which house you buy. I'm interested in helping you make a great decision. So I'm going to be a sounding board for you as you go through each home, and help you think long-term for this house. As we go through each home, I'm going to be looking for cues as to what might make this house more expensive that you're not necessarily noticing. Is it the really old windows? Is it the really old boiler? Is it the three-ply shingle roof versus the architectural shingled roof? Is it the, you know, the electric panel looks really old, and I'm looking for knob and tube in the basement. I'm looking, like all these things that I'm not an inspector, but these are the things I notice and I've learned about. And I'm going to identify those for you before you even spend a dime on your inspections, you know. Um, yeah, so I'm sure I'm going to connect you with lenders that have the best programs, and you can trust them. You can compare their quotes, and you can trust them. You're not gonna have to go digging online and going to bankrate.com and getting 10 different random strangers calling you. I'm gonna have my trusty inspectors and insurance people and contractors. And it's funny, somebody said to me yesterday, he was a for sale by owner, and he said, the best recommendations I get are from realtors. And I was like, you know why? Because I'm their customer. If they don't do a good job for you, they don't get more referrals. If you call somebody random out of the yellow pages or Yelp, they don't know you from Adam. You're one piece of business. I'm 10 pieces of business. So I'm going to give you access to all these people who really want to earn and keep my business, so they will treat you well. I'm going to look at the comparables so you don't overpay. We don't get under contract for a property that won't necessarily appraise. I'm going to negotiate the offer for you. I'm going to negotiate the inspections for you. And something that I like to do is make sure that the seller is going to provide, or listing agent's going to provide comparables to the appraiser if we're at all concerned that it won't appraise, because it doesn't help us to not appraise. Like, sure, it would be great to get a $20,000 discount, but there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. So let's just work our ass to make sure it appraises. I'm going to be there for you at the walkthrough, the final walkthrough, in case anything new has come up. And then for the 20% of every deal that's unique and different, I'm a trained problem solver. Or if you haven't been really doing any deals yet, I have a team of trained problem solvers who've seen so many scenarios that we can help navigate as we go through the process. So you're going to be showing your value the whole way through, and indicating that by signing this buyer agency agreement, we're committing to work together. And because you've run those numbers for them with various scenarios, they can see how much it's going to cost them. So when I showed this to my client, and ultimately even if he was able to finance it, it was going to cost him like 30 extra bucks a month to have me as his advisor, it just made sense. So now, to be honest, I haven't quite quote unquote like nailed down exactly the conversation that I want to have with people. And, I feel comfortable on the fly, because of my experience. So I would definitely recommend everything that we just discussed, working with people, mentors, or team leaders, to nail down how you're going to do your consultation. Because like, if you're, working with, you said, was it Mikey you said, or Mikey? I'm sure they have a way that they've been doing their consultations and they're adapting it. So, but I would say, yeah, as far as like getting up to speed, my biggest piece of advice would be to learn how to do closing cost estimates really well and talk about buyer finance really well. And learn about houses. And again, go on shadow as many inspections as you can, as fast as you can, so, just thinking in terms of like reaching out to agents in your office. Hey, do you have any buyers going under contract soon? Can I shadow that? Or simply call any inspectors that your colleagues use and say, hey, I'd love to be able to shadow some inspections this week. Can I shadow you like all day Thursday or whatever? And hopefully you get to see a variety of homes, not just one kind of home. So in that way, I'll pause here, and before I go on to kind of Tereska's question about now you don't like, how do you work in the field? Now the buyers agreed to, sign the paperwork. Yes, before I go see it homes. So the question then becomes, all right, great. You want to work together? Great. This is how I get paid. When do you want to go start seeing homes? Or by when can you get, when do you want to start seeing homes? Next Thursday? great. All we need to do between now and then is get you fully pre-approved by the lender and sign the buyer agency paperwork that puts me to work for you. I'll share that with you. You know, you're either walking them through it together or you're sharing it with them, you know, through your online signature platform. And then that way you future pace them like, hey, we're going to go see homes. That's exciting. What do we got to do to get there? We got to sign the agency paperwork and get you pre-approved. You know, because we don't want to risk showing them houses they can't afford. Now, this one caveat. So this is mostly like, I mostly work on buyer referrals. So it's not like I'm working with Zillow or internet leads. So working with internet and Zillow leads, you may need to be like, technically you're not supposed to show a house without that paperwork. So are any of you working with like internet or cold leads like that? Or going to be?
I will be going. Yeah. And I
Okay.
believe that there's some kind of, Zillow has some kind of agreement set up that the caller, like the client signs for the inquiry with the specific property. And then after that,
Great.
then you sign like a buyer agreement with them. So yeah, Zillow has some kind of documentation that they've set up to kind of like go with the new, like the
I
change.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's like the nicest thing they've ever done.
Yeah,
just put the Zillow.
as far
Yeah.
my understanding of that, yeah.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
keep Zillow, but I'm trying to. I registered with ResNet for REO.
Okay. Okay.
I had a agent when I first started.
Yeah.
He did very well with
Yeah.
ResNet, and he would give me
Okay.
the buyer.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, so for Zillow leads and the internet leads, it's pretty much ideally like, I
Zillow.
can't tell you how to do your business in terms of, are you going to be a stickler for getting something signed before you go see a house? Or are you going to go to the house prepared to show them, you know, the buyer agency, the consumer notice for sure, the buyer agency agreement, and plan for a modified version of a consult at the house. So for example, I had a listing that I got a call on. It's very rare for me to get listing calls. I've never been somebody who got a lot of sign calls. And honestly, I don't like answering my phone. And I find it's like really exhausting to talk to people calling on my listing because it's like, you should know if you can afford it or not. Why don't you know about the property already online? Like it, anyway. So I get this call. I end up showing him two of my listings because they were right near each other in a very similar price point. Neither was for him. And I brought with me closing estimates for both properties. I brought my buyer agency or my buyer guide. And in each home, like I gave him a little bit of each of the conversations. So like in one home, we talked about the closing cost estimate. And another home, we talked about the process. And then we ended up, you know, going and trying to remember if we actually did a Zoom consult. We ended up going, like, it was my record fast buyer because from start to finish, I met him and we were sold in 32 days on a condo that had to get VA approved. So I don't even, at this point, I don't even remember if we met on Zoom at all. Because everything happened so fast. But yeah, so if you're ending up meeting a stranger at a house, you do need to, if you're going to meet them at the house first, you're going to need to plan on doing some sort of impromptu consult to talk to them about that. Now, if you want to incentivize somebody to do a consult in advance, you know, one tactic could be, hey, there's a bunch of properties that might fit your needs and I can save you a lot of time, you know, or if you want to save time, I can coordinate a whole showing tour. We would just need to hop on a real quick 30-minute Zoom so that we make sure we're on the same page and I show you exactly what fits your, you know, your goals or whatever. And in that way, you're dangling something in front of them that's very valuable, and that is seeing multiple houses, you know, at once rather than just seeing the one they called on. Because imagine they're clicking submit, submit, submit. Now they got 10 agents calling them. And, you know, you could ask them, what other homes have you clicked, you know, contact agent? I can show you all of those homes. You know, I would look at that paperwork to make sure that it doesn't preclude you from showing them the house, that maybe if they sign something with another agent, Kristen. I'm not sure how it all works, but just make sure you understand the paperwork so that if you do steal those listings, those showings.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now you have, let's say you've got 8 properties, you're going to do a tour and you have no idea what the compensation is, for any of them. Let's say though, that you've worked out your worst case scenario at their highest price at the beginning of, let's say this person is offering 0 commission. You've already worked out your worst case scenario. So in this arena, in this market, I would highly doubt that you can't get your commission as a seller assist. Like, let's just, aside from buyers who already need a seller assist, I would just highly doubt if you can't negotiate the commission in as an assist. You know, so that's like the best case scenario. If your buyer doesn't already need an assist, you work it out so that your commission is an assist. And then in that way, it doesn't matter what the sellers are offering, right? If you worked it out so that the most expensive property, your client can afford to pay you either in cash or as an assist, I wouldn't not show it, because you don't know what they'll accept. Because, and then even so, like, when push comes to shove, you never know what somebody will accept when something's sitting in front of them. So many times people say, I won't take less than, and then you give them something that's less than, and they take it.
Mhm.
And, you know, here's a great example. I was just sharing this with my coach yesterday. Two clients. The one client, we thought like this was a very unique property. It was 1-bedroom house on a 3,000 square foot lot in the middle of a very not popular neighborhood where there's a ton of land for sale, but somebody could rebuild, or you had to renovate an 800 square foot 1-bedroom house. So we thought maybe they could get 135 for it. Now, everybody I talked to was like, I would pay in the less than 100. And at some point, the seller and I agreed that they should lower the price to get, you know, to get an offer. So I was thinking they should go for 99.9, and I suggested it. And then they said, how about 115? At the time, I was feeling very tired and I just didn't want to continue the conversation. So I was like, all right, let's go with it. I was moving my house. This was like last week. So I was like thinking about other things. I just didn't want to put the effort in. I was like, okay, 115. We lowered it to 115. And then a couple days later, they lowered it to 99.9. And then they were willing to entertain the 75K offer that had come in the week before. And by the time we lowered it to 75K, that buyer was gone. And now we're at 75K and we got a 45K offer. Anyway, so had I spent a little time, I could have gotten them to 99.9 right away. Because on the flip side, I had a seller who was a for sale by owner who really, really, really wanted to try for 250. I was like, look, we got to be under 2 to get this sold. And then we had issues with the tenant and the seller. And I said, look, we don't even have access to the property. We need somebody who's willing to take on this mess. We need to go to 125 or 150. The seller said, let's go for 175. And I was like, and then in this case, I made the effort and I was like, look, we got to get to market or under market. We got to go to 150. 175 is not going to cut it. We go to 150. We got 3 offers. 2 were in the 120s. 1 was over asking. And, you know, there's issues with that offer such that it's gone away. And now we need to start over. But like a little bit of effort, you can get people to do the right thing for themselves. And going to 150 was the right thing. Meanwhile, now we've got keys to the property. We don't have the same issues, but I got them to where the market is, and we're going to get this thing sold one way or another. And ultimately, they may end up taking 125, 120, 125. Whereas before they wanted 250. But now they're so tired of the property, they just want to get rid of it. And they see the value based on what's going on and the pain it's causing them. So anyway, I don't know where or why I got into that tangent. But as far as like, it does, you know, yeah, what a seller say they will take. First of all, we're not privy to that as buyers agents. What we can do is just be armed with the information of what our buyers can do And if it seems within reason, the buyer can afford the asking price. And chances are in this marketplace, a seller will most likely be willing to do a seller assist. It doesn't matter what they say they will pay upfront. If your buyer can pay for it out of pocket, or an assist will work. No matter what, it's worth it to show. If, let's say, your buyer absolutely needs an assist to cover the commission, it's worth it to have a conversation with the agent and say, hey, your client's property is one of our top 3. We're just looking to find out, what commission is being offered. And then you can run those numbers from there. And the answer may be very easily, oh yeah, they're offering X%, or with an acceptable offer, we'll do a seller assist. It gets a little bit more dicey when your client already needs a seller assist and they're not getting a grant. And then it does matter, so you may find yourself, for that client, making phone calls ahead of time. Or texts. Yeah, I would probably want to do it via email. That way I just have it at least in writing. And you might even want to create a template for yourself in your email account, just to say, my buyer's interested in your property, is a subject line. And then, what commission are you offering? So I can let my buyer know before we go see the property.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm calling you up.
And on the listing side, I really do believe this is as much of the agent's, listing agent's job to protect the buyer's agent. Because number one, all of the comparables that our sellers right now are being compared to had a commission for the buyer. So if, let's say, I sold a property for 400, even if the commission goes away, there's going to be a stretch of time where you could assume some percentage was paid towards a commission. And if a buyer sees a comparable property for 400 and they have to pay their buyer agent out of pocket, they're just going to reduce the price by that amount. So as a listing agent, my goal is to help the seller see that A, they're going to offer you less because the comparables had a commission. They're just going to include a seller assist, or buyers can't afford it and you're reducing your buyer pool. And honestly, I'm even starting a step further back with my seller clients, and I tell them, buyers have always paid the commissions. They pay it through the sales price. The seller is the one that decides how much. Having a buyer be able to finance the commissions with the closing costs, through the sales price, is the most efficient way for everybody to get professional representation.
Mhm.
When both parties get professional representation in a deal, things go much more smoothly. Because if I were to, there's no incentive for a listing agent to represent a buyer if they're not getting paid extra. So if I were representing a buyer, quote unquote, representing a buyer, I would then be being a dual agent, and I'm no longer your sole advocate.
Mhm.
Or if the buyer's foregoing representation, they're going to feel like, why am I, I shouldn't pay as much for the house because I don't have representation. And when an unrepresented party doesn't have representation, they don't really trust the other agent because they're not working for them. So the current system that we have is the most efficient way for everybody to get what they want, get seamlessly to the closing table as much as possible, and have their interests represented. So I really do want listing agents to have the interests of buyer's agents, because buyer's agents are wonderful at,
I have a question. So I've
Yeah,
heard a
sure.
lot more about this on the buyer's agent side of it, and coming from your experience of being a seller's agent more primarily. So are you saying that with the changes, I also feel like I'm glad that I'm coming in at this point because I'm not used
Yeah.
to the old system. So I'm just
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm learning this new thing and I don't have any
Yeah. No bad habits.
patterns. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I know that the commission is not going to be listed on the MLS, but are you saying that when you're working with a seller, you still will like try to prioritize a commission for the buyer's agent within like, and then like, so I'm a buyer's agent, you're a seller's agent. I can call you up or email you or whatever and say like, hey, do you have a agreed upon commission for the buyer's agent with your seller?
Yeah.
Is that how that would work?
Yeah, so that's where the link tree comes into play, where I'll have a Google spreadsheet of my listings and the prices and the commission being offered to the buyer.
Okay. So it's not like
So
publicly advertised, but it's still something that you're planning on continuing to
it
work.
will be,
like,
I mean, it will be public
okay. Yeah.
because my link tree is public.
Yeah, but it's not on that.
Right. So if
Got
you
it.
were to email or text me, I would say, check out stacysanseverino.com. A spreadsheet of all my commissions are there
Okay.
because I don't want to have to misquote myself or like, you know,
Totally.
yeah.
Okay.
Let me, you know, I have been long talking about commissions as separate entities with clients, like, so for 4 years at least now. It wasn't even my idea because somebody else that I was working with at the time, you know, so I tell, you know, sellers like, you know, and especially now it's like, do you understand, you know, what's going on with buyer agent commissions, you know, in today's, you know, market, you know, find out what they already understand, you know, and then you can take it from there. And I was like, well, this is what I charge. I charge X percent. And I'm encouraging you to offer a buyer's agent commission for these reasons. I have long been showing sellers what the other sellers in the area are paying for those comparable listings so that they can, if there's 12 homes, I'm like, 8 of them are offering 2.5%. One is offering 2% and 3 are offering, I don't know, or 2 or 3, whatever, are offering 3%. So what do you want to offer, if anything? I will not be able to see anymore, you know, obviously what the comparables are offering, but I can certainly encourage them to do what I would put as my minimum commission as a buyer's agent. Yeah. Or, you know, say, you know, be open. Like I was on a Zoom. I know our forms are changing. There's going to be certain fields for concessions for buyers closing costs and some things for commission. So they don't have to commit upfront publicly, but I want to help them be prepared, you know, for a percentage, and by helping them understand the value of the buyer's agent. And what I find is really funny, because I do work with a lot of for sale by owners, is the one party in the world who really values buyer's agents. It's a for sale by owner. They're the group that doesn't want to pay a listing agent, you know? And what's interesting is in this economy, I was able to convince a for sale by owner who was willing to pay 4%. I got her to commit to pay me my portion, offer the balance to a buyer's agent. And then because I knew the area or somebody could qualify for a grant, I put it in the listing. Hey, you might be able to qualify for the grant. That will cover the balance of your commission. But I knew no matter what, I wasn't going to get more than what I agreed with the seller. And then there's the balance left over for the buyer. So in this way, it's almost like tables have turned for sale by owners, where it's like, why are you staying off the market? If you're willing to pay 2.5% to 3%, why not hire a listing agent and then leave it to the buyer's agent? Now that you have 100% exposure to the whole market, let the buyer, you know, let the buyer figure out how to pay for their agent. So yeah, it's an interesting world. So I really don't love not securing a certain amount for the buyer's agent, but it's all negotiable anyway. Like, you know, like in the past, it was like nearly impossible to get anybody to agree to a commission other than what they had in mind before putting an offer in. Like now I think we're going to be, negotiating it with the offer. So it just makes it a little bit easier because that's kind of how sellers always wanted to do it. They're like, I don't want to commit to anything before I see what you're offering me, which is stupid because ultimately then just negotiate on the net. Like, but people are not as logical. And as I like to say, nobody asked my opinion when this lawsuit came out because it's a stupidest result, because I'm willing to bet 80% of the sellers in this lawsuit were buying and did not complain when their buyer's agent were being paid through the sales price for their purchase. That's just me. Anywho, it's 12:22. Let's stop it there. Any questions, comments, concerns, or ha-has? What was the most valuable? What was something valuable today that you'll bring forward in your business?
Everything we just talked about. I had thought of stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I said absolutely.
Yeah.
You have such wealth of knowledge. It's just
Yeah.
worth listening all the time.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, I appreciated your breakdown of like the flat fee versus the percentage, kind of like thinking about what to consider in the future. Also just like you just threw out a lot of really valuable qualities of what a realtor offers to their client, which like some of those were already in my head, but then there are other ones that I was like, oh yeah, also that is an additional
Yeah.
thing to just like say up front. Yeah, I have a whole Google Doc of notes. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Sexy, I just
Absolutely.
have one thing to say. One of the
Sure.
things I noticed even at closing, for a lot of agents, they don't charge the buyers anything above the commission. Like when I do transactions, I charge minimum amount, and then I charge an administrative fee. But most of the times on my closing, I see the agents, they're only accepting what's available to them. And they're afraid to ask for additional monies. So it worries me that if you're asking a certain amount and somebody's shopping around for a buyer's agent, they may go to somebody who charges less. What's your
Then,
thought on that?
yeah, then you don't know your value,
Mm-hmm.
or your
Okay.
value's less.
Or you're content. I was content. I
Yeah.
worked with a
Yeah.
young woman
Yeah.
who charged it 500 administration free to show 3 listings. After that, she no longer wanted to deal with them. So
I'm sorry.
she got 500.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Explain the situation. I
Yeah,
don't
She
understand.
was charging a $500 administration fee just to show the 3 houses. She got tired of going out there and they going down the street to another agent.
Oh, okay. So she didn't sign an agency agreement with them.
She signed an agency agreement after the
Oh,
administration fee. If she was hired from one of
okay.
those houses she's shown for a
Okay.
$500
Oh,
administration
okay.
fee,
Okay.
then she went.
So really what she's doing is she's saying, I will show you 3 houses. It costs you $500 up front. And if you want to work with me, then we sign an agreement.
Yeah, similar like that. Similar like that. She
Yeah.
explained everything that you just talked about.
Yeah.
And then this is how she gets her commission. I charge a $500 administration fee to show
I don't
you
know that
homes.
I wouldn't call that an administration fee if it's showing houses. So like, I think new kind of fee for service models will come up, and you have to decide, like, as a real estate agent, anybody who's an entrepreneur or earning, like, works on referral or it doesn't get a salary. Like, my dad's an attorney. When I was a kid, I learned a very valuable lesson from him. Half the time he is developing his business and half the time he is servicing his business. So we are going to do a lot of work to develop our business and work for free. So it's like, I don't get every listing that I go on, and I did all that work to go on that listing appointment. Or like, I don't, like, if let's say I don't shop with buyers where I don't have an agreement with them. Have I shown buyers houses that it didn't end up working out with them? Sure. So, but like, I will do a lot of free work to get business. So you have to figure out what is your breaking point. And if it has to do with buyers and showing properties, you know, it might be an easier sell to show 3 properties for free and do the consult with them and show your value and get them to sign up,
Mm-hmm.
because you may earn, like, let's just call it $7,000, and you have to figure out how many times do I have to show 3 houses to earn a $7,000 commission, versus if I charge, let's say you charge, you know, you get a random call, like, how likely is it a Zillow buyer to want to pay you $50 per house? You know, like, you know, so I just don't know how she's meeting the $500 buyer. And maybe that's a referred buyer. I'd rather do it my way with a referred buyer.
He did this years ago where
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it was allowed. I would show a house. I
Oh.
don't care to anyone, for anyone. And
Yeah. So I would just figure, like, you know, I think time will tell. Experiment with your time and what feels right to you and the leads that you're working with. Because you may find, like, oh, okay, you want to see 3 houses, that'll be $150 and you're not tied to me, and maybe somebody likes that. But if somebody can easily find somebody to show them that house for free, why would they pay for it from you?
why would they go to another agent too after I did it for free?
So
I understand, just I liked the way
Yeah.
you said it. I
Yeah.
also thought of putting it in with the seller's assist, because I've been thinking about it, to go out there. You know, I'm
Yeah.
active for years, and I don't
Yeah.
sell. I don't buy
Yeah.
and sell nothing.
Yeah. And I think I've heard mixed rumors, but about VA buyers being able to pay for commission now, and FHA, like, so buyers who would normally get seller's assist, or normally their loans would not allow them to pay commission, like, those rules are going to be changing. So
Okay.
I think we're not going to have this issue with the buyers who already need a seller assist and how we get paid. I think the industry is just going to change in multiple ways to
That's
facilitate
right.
this.
Yep.
So.